Hi students, welcome to the BYJU'S Hindu News Analysis for 14th of August 2018. So let's get started. So let's look into the first article. So the first article says Pune tops ease of living index, Patna ranked lowest of 111 cities. So what exactly is the context? So when we look into the context, it says three cities in Maharashtra, that is Pune, Navi Mumbai and Greater Mumbai, top the first ease of living index, which is brought about by the Union Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So the first point from the prelims perspective is who actually releases this ease of living index? It is the Union Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So the national capital New Delhi is ranked at 65 in 111 states, while Chennai is at 14th place. Kolkata did not participate in this survey. So what exactly is the details? So when we look into the details, what it says is that this particular index has actually collected data from all the urban local bodies, basically on four important parameters. So what exactly are the four important parameters? One of the first important parameter is the institutions or the governance. So what do we mean by it? It means institutions in this particular sect, the urban local governance, which means all those government mechanisms or the government institutes that have been established to bring about a change with respect to the local administration or the urban administration. So the first point is how exactly is this government administration? Is it good or is bad? What exactly are the problem areas? So when we say institutions as a whole, it means the government mechanism to bring about a change within that particular paradigm. So that becomes the first important point, and that is institutions. So second important point is with respect to the social indicators. So what exactly are the social indicators here? Let's say for example the education, the health, or for example the security. So how exactly within this particular city the local administration or the institution is being able to provide all these social indicators? How good is the education within the society? How good is the health precautions that have been taken by this particular society? How good is the security? How exactly is the law and order maintained within the security? So it considers all the parameters with respect to the law and order, that is the security, the education, the health, as well as the identity of this particular city as a whole. So on one hand you have the institutional mechanism, that is the government. The next is how well is it able to perform with certain social indicators, and the third that it goes on to speak is in terms of the economic indicators. So the economic indicators is how well is it able to establish the infrastructure. If it is able to establish the infrastructure, how is it able to pull in all the companies? If it is able to pull in the companies into the city, how exactly is the employment opportunities within the city? So when we are speaking about the economic indicators, it basically means the employment generation within the city domain because of the government's pull for the companies within that particular city. And then what we have is finally the physical infrastructure, which basically means how exactly is the wastewater, the solid waste management, is the pollution under check within this particular city, how exactly is the housing provided, are there the number of slums, are there slums actually provided all the basic amenities, what exactly is the land use, is the power being given to all these infrastructural organizations within and outside the city, and then you have what exactly is the transport that is provided, are we able to reach a particular city north, south, east, west at a very minimum time, and then what we have is the public open spaces. Apart from all this, is there something called as the parks, and then for recreation, all these things are with respect to the physical infrastructure. So when a particular ranking is actually provided to a particular city, what it basically looks into four parameters. In these four parameters it has actually looked into all these dimensions within that, and it is actually given this particular ranking. And what exactly has happened is there are certain cities, let's say for example Kolkata in this particular case, these cities were actually not willing to contribute, or even they were reluctant to actually participate, that's why they are not included. And certain other states, let's say for example Delhi, we did say that Delhi is ranked at around 65. So these are some of the cities which were actually reluctant to provide certain data, so that is why they have actually ranked low. So what we will also have to understand is currently it is the information that is collected within the local bodies, that is the urban local bodies, through the government setup. But what this particular ease of living index says is that in the future it will also consider the feedback from the citizens as well as all the stakeholders, whether it is the private, the civil society, or the NGOs which are also involving in bringing about the change in the city. For now it is only considered what the government or the urban local bodies has given, but in the future it will consider all the stakeholders, who is the citizen, the stakeholder, the civil society, the people people, their feedback will also be taken, and then the ranking will be awarded to all these cities is what it has said. So as we have already discussed, apart from these 3 cities, that is Maharashtra, Pune, Navi Mumbai and Greater Mumbai, the other 10 cities in the top 10 include Tirupati, Chandigarh, Thane, Raipur, Indore, Vijayawada as well as Bhopal. The 3 cities at the bottom of the rankings is Rampur, Kohima and Patna. So what we will also have to understand is what exactly is the challenges. So when we look into the challenges, what was the basic and the most important challenges was how exactly were these people able to extract the data. Majority of these urban local bodies actually didn't have the data. So the first major challenge was how is that these organizations, while conducting this particular ease of living index, extracted the data. So the data was the most important point to provide the ranking, but in this particular case, extraction of data itself became a major challenge. So the first point is data extraction within the local bodies was the first major challenge that this ease of living index actually faced. So apart from this, there were particular complications in terms of the, let's say, health sector, where local bodies did not have access to with respect to the health indicators in the private hospitals. So we do have all the data with respect to the government hospitals, but when it comes to the private hospitals, they didn't have much of the data. So when it comes to few segments, let's say for example health, they did not have a proper understanding of the data. So these were some of the constraints that have been felt, but what exactly is the significance? So when we understand what exactly the significant aspect is, this is for the first time became a data driven approach. So what do we mean by it? So because we have all the data, so we have the statistical evidence that this particular city is performing well, this city is not performing well. So for the first time we have all the data that we have sorted out. So there is a particular statistics that we have. So because we have all the data and the statistics that is I have, what we can do is we can channelize government's initiative or the civil society's energy or the NGO's coordination with all these things and make sure that that particular sector which is currently in lacunae or which is lacking behind can be given all the energy or the funding. So what it will do is, because we have the data and statistics, because we have a data driven approach, we would be able to plan the urban segment and we would be able to constantly monitor and bring about a change into this particular segment. That becomes the first important significant point. At the same time, what we will also be able to develop is we will be also able to develop the city managers who get a firm grip on what exactly is happening within the city. They'll be able to access and compare key perform initiatives with the other cities. In case the other cities have actually performed much better, they can actually pick up a particular model from the other city, bring about the change within this particular city and make suitable changes and adapt the same model with relevant changes into their city. So it provides all the key parameters or the model from another city and implementation of a similar model to their home cities, so that they would be able to bring about a change within their local bodies. This is the most significant part with respect to the ease of living index. So what we would be able to understand as a whole is that there are certain problems and these problems have been already sorted out, and now because we have data with us, all the issues that we are able to see with respect to the data and statistics, the government would be looking at it, and in case you want to bring about a change or a transformation, look at these statistics and bring about the change in the local body is what this article all about. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says disclose panels on sexual harassment, companies told. So what exactly is the context? So when we look into the context, it clearly says in order to ensure better implementation of the law against the sexual harassment at workplace, the center has made it mandatory for companies to disclose whether they have constituted an internal complaints committee to provide such allegations. So what we need to understand is every company, private company or any organization which has more than 10 people, they have to make sure that they have this internal complaints committee, and this internal complaints committee will look into all the allegations or the complaints that have been given by a particular woman in an organization to this committee, and this committee will have to look into what exactly is the problem that a woman faces. So let's try and understand something with respect to the background here. So what do we mean by sexual harassment? The first thing that pops up is what exactly is the sexual harassment. So sexual harassment in a private organization or in a government organization or all those organizations which has actually have more than 10 people or more employees, what it says is that in case there is a person who wants to establish a physical contact and he makes an advances towards women, or he demands or requests for sexual favors, or he sexually has a coloring remark, and what he does is he also shows pornography, and he then gives some unwelcome physical signs, and then he has verbal as well as unverbal conduct of a sexual nature, all these things will fall under the umbrella of the sexual harassment. So when a particular person actually faces this harassment, a woman faces the harassment, she can actually complain to this internal committee. On getting into this internal committee, what it says is it is mandatory for any organization with 10 or more employees to constitute an internal complaints committee. So an employer who does not do so could actually face a fine of up to 50,000. This is statistical data, and it further goes on to say an internal complaints committee should consist of a presiding officer who is actually a female employee at a senior level in the organization with at least 2 employees, preferably committed to the cause of the women. So what do you mean by it? She has to support the arguments of the women. In case there is a flight that a particular woman sees, in case she is in danger with respect to the sexual harassment, then these people will have to make sure that she is actually consoled and suitable action is taken against that particular person who is actually barging this particular thing. So what it further goes on to say is, and a member from an NGO or a person familiar with issues relating to sexual harassment. So apart from these people, there should also be another person who is a part of an NGO who is able to understand the concerns and the issues with respect to women, and then they will have to resonate with respect to whatever the issues with respect to the women are. So what are the powers that has been given to the committee? The committee would have powers similar to those of a civil court and would have to complete its inquiry within 30 days. So what exactly does this particular article basically speak about? So when we look into what exactly are the rules that are amended, what it says is the Corporate Affairs Ministry has amended the Companies Accounts Rules of 2014 governed by the Companies Act of 2013, mandating the disclosure. So what exactly do we mean by it? Let's say for example, every company for that matter has something called as non-financial disclosures. So these non-financial disclosures are something which is provided under section 134 of the Companies Act. So every company, when it is producing this particular financial disclosure, it also has to compulsorily produce this non-financial disclosure. So this becomes very imperative for a company to give it to the government. So what the government has currently done is, this particular initiative of sexual harassment coming under the non-financial disclosure is compulsory for the companies from now on. As of now it was not compulsory, but moving ahead, this 134, that is section 134 of the Companies Act, has made it mandatory that these people will have to give a particular report, and this report will actually have all the cases with respect to in case there is any of the sexual harassment that a particular employee in their organization has actually gone through. So basically this section 134 actually lists the disclosure framework that all the directors within that company have to comply within the annual report. So what exactly is the significance? So one of the major steps towards making the workplace safer for all the women who are actually working in the private, the government organization, is the basic advantage of this particular move. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says undoing a legacy of injustice. So this is picked up from yesterday's editorial. So we could not have time yesterday and we didn't have much of explanation, so we will be continuing this article with respect to this today. So what exactly is the context? So when we look into the context, the Delhi High Court has actually struck it down, which says that it is inconsistent with the constitution. So what exactly is the background? So this particular act was actually formulated with the objective of keeping all the streets of Bombay. So this particular act is basically speaking about the Bombay Prevention of Begging Act. So when it was formulated, the major objective of this particular act was to keep the streets of Bombay clear of all the destitutes, the leprosy patients, or the mentally ill so-called people, and set up institutions and move these people into these institutions. And we go back to the history. What exactly happened was, this was always a colonial imprint, or this was a colonial legacy. So what do we mean by it? Let's say for example, the British always believed that they wanted certain taxations, and these taxations had to be generated from the people. So what we need to understand is the fact that that because let's take example of certain tribes. So these tribes were actually called as criminal tribes. Why? Because these tribes always moved around, and because they moved all around and they were not restricted to a certain place, what happened was taxation was not being paid to the British. So the British actually felt that because these tribes were always moving around, was having a vagabond life, are not paying taxes, so they need to make sure that these people who are not paying taxes come under the umbrella of tax. So what they basically did was they brought about a particular law, and that is the Criminal Tribes Act. So because they brought about this law, there was a particular negative tinge attached to these people, and they started restricting themselves within a particular area, within a particular domain, and that is why these people started restricting themselves to the particular area, so the British were able to enforce all the taxation on these people. So this is basically the colonial imprint. It means that because the government or the British government wanted to bring about taxation reforms, that is why they started putting a particular color on all these people. At the same time, the Bombay Prevention of the Begging Act also has a criminal thing. That is, it was one which was actually brought up by the British in order to make sure that they are actually criminalizing certain processes, and at the same time they are also acting as if they are working for the destitute and the needy people. So this becomes the historical aspect. So now let's try and understand what exactly the definition of the begging says. So when we look into the definition, what it actually says is the act defines it to include soliciting or receiving alms in public place, whether or not under any pretense such as singing, dancing, fortune telling, performing, or offering any article for sale, or having no visible means of subsistence, or wandering about remaining in any public space in such condition or manner as it makes likely that the person doing so exists soliciting or receiving alms. So what exactly does the definition say? So in case there is a particular person who is in a public space, and in case he is not performing any of the acts that is determining him to carry out economical activity. Let's say for example, if a person is singing or he is dancing, he is performing certain actions in the public place, so he is performing an economic activity, so he will not be called as a person who is begging. But all those people who are not performing these economical activities but instead are begging or soliciting or asking money from the people without performing any activity, such people will be falling under the definition of begging, is what this particular article says. So what does this begging actually do? So when we look into what exactly this basically does, it has certain issues. So what exactly is the basic idea? So one of the major and the most disturbing fact is that the police have the power to actually arrest these individuals without even the warrant. So in case they actually come up with a particular person who is seen in public nuisance in this particular area, the police, without even having a particular warrant, they can arrest this particular person. At the same time, it gives the magistrates all the power to commit them to a certified institution, which is actually another name called as detention center. So what do you mean by it? So it means in case there is a particular person who is actually begging in a particular street, these people will have to be taken to a detention center. So up to 3 years on the commission of the first offense and up to 10 years upon the second offense. Before that, it strips them of their privacy and dignity by compelling them to themselves to be fingerprinted. So what do we mean by it? So what it clearly says is, say for example, there is a person who is actually there begging, he'll be taken to this detention center. On detention center, what exactly happens is, there is this person who goes to this particular institute, but this certified institute or the detention center will have the absolute power on this person who is brought about from the society into this particular center. So what it does is, it provides all these people all the powers to give them the punishment and at the same time to extract the manual work. It's not that these people are actually there in the public, they are just not given all the detention center, they are not given any empowerment as such, but instead the person who is actually taking care of this detention center will have the power to get all the manual work, and at the same time he has all the powers to actually punish him in that particular center. And at the same time, what it also says is, disobeying these laws within this particular domain of detention center can also be in such a way that he'll be landing himself in the jail. So is this the way that we are doing? doing? Not exactly. So this is the point that we need to consider within this paradigm. And at the same time, what it says is, it says that that particular person is stripped off his privacy. So where exactly is his privacy here? Just because he's begging there, you get him to the detention center, and just because he's in detention center, you take the fingerprint without even his permission, and all the things punishing and then taking manual work. Is it not violating the privacy that is laid under Article 21? That's what it says. And at the same time, it further goes on to say, the act also authorizes the detention of the people dependent upon the beggar, that is the family, and the separation of children over the age of 5. So this is another most important point we need to consider, that there is separation of the family that happens. At the same time, what exactly, when we look into the definition actually comes up with a very vague ideology. So neither the Indian penal code or any of the soliciting acts, let's say for example, it is actually said what exactly is soliciting and all these things. So the act does not define what is begging here. So instead it is a very vague term, it is an ambiguous term, it creates a lot of confusion and dilemma. So the Indian penal code does not even define this particular term. So what it means is, there is a lot of inconsistency with respect to the definition, and because there is a lot of inconsistency, what it can result in is abuse of the implementation. Because it becomes very random or arbitrary, it can lead to a lot of arbitrary execution of this particular law. Apart from this, what it has failed to also recognize is that there is a failure to actually differentiate between the forceful as well as the non-forceful form of begging. So there are few people who are actually forced into begging, and there are few people who take a voluntary thing. So all those people who are actually forced into begging, these people who are forcing them should be put behind bars. But this does not make any definition clause, or it does not differentiate between forceful and the involuntary and the voluntary actions of begging. At the same time, the act not only criminalizes the act of begging, so it is criminalizing the act of begging, but also targets the groups and the communities who are not in norms with the social norms. So there is a particular social norm that is set. In case the government actually feels that these are the people who are not following those social norms, which are not there in respect to the plural of the people, then it is criminalizing these people. So is it something which is not acceptable, right? So these are some things that we need to change, and that is why the Delhi High Court has actually given this particular verdict, and it has actually struck down this particular provision. So what we need to understand is, this particular case of Harassment versus Union of India and Karnika Savni was Union of India, where bench of Delhi High Court has actually said that the Begging Act actually violated Article 14, that is right to equality, and Article 21, that is right to personal liberty. So even before this case, it is not that the judiciary or the court actually took a very important step. Even the judiciary on its own has taken a number of steps. Let's say for example, one of the cases, and that is Olga Tellis. So what exactly happened in this particular case was, it said that all these beggars or the people who are actually asking, soliciting money, are those people who are a source of public nuisance. So with respect to Olga Tellis versus the Bombay Municipal Corporation, the courts have called all these pavement dealers as the public nuisance. So it is not that the judiciary has actually taken a particular stand immediately and they have actually moved about this particular right to life important clause, but it has actually said in Olga Tellis that all these pavement dealers are actually a source of public nuisance. And at the same time, there is also one of the important other cases which is called as the Hemraj. So in this particular Hemraj versus the Commissioner of Police, these people were called as anarchists. So again, it is not that the court has taken a very beautiful stand, but it has evolved over a period of time. So apart from this, let's say for example the Almitra Patel versus the Union of India, these people were actually considered to be pickpocketers. It has taken a transition time after time to actually come up with this particular verdict. So what exactly does the Harshwandar versus Union of India case say? So it has said that you, the government, should actually make sure and differentiate what exactly is the voluntary crime, what exactly is the involuntary begging. So only those involuntary or the voluntary people should actually be the people who should be given certain things, but the involuntary ones who are forced or coerced or pushed into this particular begging, you can take criminal action against them. But if it is voluntary, it becomes the most important point on you, the government, to bring about changes within this particular society. What the High Court has clearly said is that there was no particular distinction that was made between the forceful as well as the non-forceful. That's why it says, please make sure that you do not criminalize this voluntary action, but in case you feel that there is a forceful or coercive action, then you can take action within this particular domain. And at the same time, it is said that under Article 21 of the Constitution, it becomes your responsibility to provide them all the survival needs, and the survival needs include, first thing is making sure that they are not hunger, so you will have to provide them the food, and you will have to provide them the clothing so that they have that particular warmth in their body, and at the same time they need a roof on the top, so you need to provide them the shelter. So you were not providing all these things, so you were planning to eliminate the whole begging. Yes, it is fair and fine argument that you wanted to eliminate begging, but what have you done for these beggars? It is your important thing that you will have to provide all these amenities, but you are not doing all these things, but instead you want to eliminate begging. How can you do this without even providing all this? So one of the basic important things that you will have to do is you will have to discharge your obligations. You have a moral conscience, and you will have to make sure that all these people are actually getting their food. It's not that these people are actually coming up to this particular ladder. These people would not want to lend hands, or they would not want to ask from other things, and they are actually begging. It's not because they want to beg, but it's because of their incapacity. So what you need to as a government do is you need to root out this particular begging by understanding how exactly the poverty works. You cannot just understand the symptoms, but instead look at the root cause, and when you understand the root cause is the poverty, so you will have to eliminate the poverty. So bring about certain structural revolution. Let's say, for example, you will have to provide them the education or social protection or discrimination within the ethnicity, or there are certain people who do not even have the lands, and there are people who are completely isolated. Bring about structural reforms in all these things. Bring about a change with respect to all these things. Wash out the poverty. Obviously then the begging will not be there, but instead if you are criminalizing the begging, then that's not the right way to go about, is what the Delhi High Court has actually said. So what exactly is the significant aspect? So when we look into what exactly the significant aspect is, the Delhi High Court judgment actually marks a crucial step in dismantling one of the most vicious and enduring legacies of the colonialism, and at the same time it seeks to undo a number of injustices and wants to lift up all the individuals and the communities so that they would be able to get equal citizenship in all these paradigms. And at the same time, what can the government do as a way forward? One of the things that we will have to understand is we will have to take one of the examples of the Portugal. So what exactly happens in Portugal was, Portugal also had a criminalization with respect to drug use and possession in 2001. So there was a particular law, and this law was actually to do with drug abuse. So what they did was they had criminalized this particular people who are actually using this drug use, but it realized that this has to be changed. These people who are actually criminalized were no more criminalized, but they were taken to the detention centers, and all the money that was used for enforcement was instead diverted towards bringing about a change as to why this drug abuse is happening. Let's say, for example, there are few people who are not getting the employment, there were people who are not ready getting the food, so all the money that was used for enforcement of this particular law, the same money was diverted to providing the employment for them. They were diverted in providing the education for them. So what the government can take up from the Portugal example is, in case you want to decriminalize this particular process, all the money that you are using for the same enforcement of this decriminalization, use it for decriminalization. Provide all these poor people the employment opportunities, provide them all the employment opportunities with respect to their empowerment. When they are empowered, they will never go for begging, is what this article goes on to say. So what exactly is the way forward? So what we have to understand is that the Delhi High Court has actually done a fabulous job in striking down a vicious law that has criminalized poverty, but it is now the task of the Legislative Assembly and the government to replace this criminalized punitive structure of begging act with a new set of measures that genuinely focus on the rehabilitation and integration of the most vulnerable and the marginalized members of the society. So this is what we need to understand from this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next article says huff and e-puff. So what exactly is the context? So when we look into the context, we will realize that there was one of the hearing which is a public interest litigation in the Delhi High Court, where the Delhi High Court said it was planning to ban the e-cigarettes. So what exactly is the e-cigarettes? So when we look into this particular matter, what is nothing, it has one of the fundamental principles, and what exactly happens is there is heating of this particular e-cigarette that happens on a nicotine rich liquid which actually vaporizes this particular liquid, and then when you inhale this particular cigarette, what you will get is the feeling of that particular smoke up. So what exactly is the principle? So heating of this particular nicotine rich liquid to actually produce the vapor, which on inhaling this particular air, what will happen is you will get a feeling of actually smoking this particular cigarette. So what exactly is the legal standing? So when we look into the legal standing, what we need to understand is that this particular e-cigarettes is not considered under the Kutiyattam Act of 2003. That is, it is not covered under the Cigarettes and the Other Tobacco Products Act of 2003, which actually mandates the strict warnings that are supposed to be put up in the form of pictorial warnings or in the form of packaging and advertisement. This is not covered for the e-cigarettes. So the Kutiyattam Act of 2003 is not considered with respect to this. At the same time, what it further goes on to say is that there are certain states like Maharashtra, Kerala, Karnataka and Punjab which have actually implemented this particular ban, but with respect to this, it is not actually implemented. So the government of Delhi is actually planning to come up with the same initiative as it has been there in Maharashtra, Kerala, Karnataka and Punjab. So what exactly are the concerns? Let's look at what exactly the concerns of this particular entity is. One of the first things that we need to understand with respect to this is the cases of explosion. So what exactly happens? So there is a lot number of cases with respect to this where this particular e-cigarette has actually exploded, and because it is exploded, it can also be a threat to the people. So this needs to be taken into picture. And at the same time, there has been a number of issues with respect to the addiction rate, and this can further perpetuate the habit of smoking rather than curbing this whole process of smoking menace. And there is accidental consumption of the liquid. So we did realize that what exactly happens is there is a liquid, and this liquid is actually heated up, and this vapor is actually inhaled. Sometimes if the liquid is actually directly taken up, this can lead to the death of that particular person. And at the same time, there is no uniform approach in dealing with this particular e-cigarettes, and that is why we need to look about it is some of the concerns. But is this all that we will have to understand? Not exactly. First thing that we need to do is we need to regulate the cigarette section, and then we need to speak about this particular idea of e-cigarettes. So one of the evidences in number of cases, what it has actually said is that the e-cigarettes are far more safer than the cigarettes that are seen in the mom and pop shops. So these e-cigarettes are safer than the combustible cigarettes because they do not actually produce those toxic tars that are being produced in the conventional cigarettes. So because it is not produced, these e-cigarettes are way better. Both are injurious, 100% both are injurious, but thing is these are less intense and these are less harmful than the conventional cigarettes. And at the same time, at high temperature, what happens with respect to this e-signature is they actually release carcinogens such as the formaldehyde, but this is comparatively less, and this is way comparatively lesser than what is being released with respect to the regular cigarettes. And at the same time, they also increase the diseases with respect to the mitochondrial infraction, but this is again comparatively less with respect to the normal cigarettes. And at the same time, given that combustible cigarettes are more noxious or more harmful than the electronic ones, switching from the former to the latter can only help the addicts. So what exactly can be the control measures? One of the major important thing is displaying the appropriate health warnings or regulation of the advertisements and marketing strategies, or providing future abuse and manipulation of the products control, or we will have to provide legal amendments to bring about the products under the purview of the COTPA or the relevant legislations. Or in fact, when we see what exactly the way forward can be, what it can be completely done is, instead of completely banning this particular technology, we can actually start regulating this particular sector. First, we need to make sure that cigarettes are actually barred rather than the e-cigarettes, because e-cigarettes are comparatively not much problem than the normal cigarettes. And at the same time, what we also need to do is we need to regulate the e-cigarettes tightly by creating certain standards, such as with respect to banning with respect to underage or in public use. So once we are able to do all this, then we would be able to bring about a change with respect to smoking, is what this article goes about speaking. Okay. Okay, so moving on, let's look into the next article. So in this article it says Indians will live longer if pollution is under check. So what exactly is the context? So the context here clearly says that there was a particular research, and this was from the University of Chicago and Harvard Kennedy School, which have laid out 5 key evidence-based policy recommendations in a new report released on Monday, and the report goes with the name A Roadmap Towards Cleaning India's Air. So what exactly are the group recommendations? So the group recommendations basically include improving the emissions monitoring by aligning incentives with the monitors. So the need of the monitoring, constant monitoring with respect to the pollution has to be done. Without constant monitoring, we would be not able to bring about a change with respect to the pollution. So a constant monitoring of how exactly the gases are actually reacting in the atmosphere is the most important point. And it says providing regulators with real-time data on polluters emissions. So what exactly is the emissions that is happening? The day-to-day analysis, the day-to-day data with respect to statistics have to be provided. And it further says apply monetary charges for excessive emissions. So in case there is excessive emissions from a particular organization or from a particular sector, then make sure that there is a taxation or a carbon tax that is enforced. And at the same time, providing the public with information about the polluters should be made mandatory, and using markets to reduce abatement costs on pollution is what this particular goes on to say. So what else this particular report says? It says that in case India is able to control this particular air quality standards, life expectancy would obviously increase. So it says this number would increase to 4 years if India were to meet the World Health Organization's norms. So if we are able to establish all the norms that have been sustained by the World Health Organization, if we are able to meet with respect to the particulate matter and remove the pollution, then the life expectancy will increase by 4 years is what this article goes on to say. Another important point from the prelims perspective that we will have to understand is what exactly is the air quality life index. So this air quality life index is actually a tool which is developed by the Energy Policy Institute of University of Chicago. So kindly remember this particular point from the prelims perspective. And then what exactly is this AQI? Basically it is one of the metric that provides a means to predict the overall reduction in life expectancy caused by living in places with high levels of pollution. So what exactly do we mean by it? Let's say for example we are living in a particular area, and this particular area has a national standards of particulate matter, and at the same time we also have a particulate matter standards that have been established by the World Health Organization. If we are able to meet this particular standards, we will have a particular life expectancy. But in case we are not able to meet this particular standards as established by the World Health Organization, then there will be a lot of problems with respect to pollution, and this will have an health impact, and this health impact will obviously lose to less number of years that a particular person will actually live, and that is life expectancy will actually reduce. So basically the AQLI probably what it will do is it will actually collect the country level or the national level estimates of all the life that has been lost due to pollution or due to the particulate matter concentration within that particular area. So this is all we will have to understand with respect to this article. So moving on, let's look into the next article. So the next is with respect to the prelims focus. It is speaking about Koodiyattam, which is actually there on your page 9. So Kutiyattam, which is actually a Sanskrit theatre which is practiced in the province of Kerala. So the most important point from the prelims perspective is where is it practiced? It is in Kerala. It is one of the India's oldest living theatrical traditions, originating more than 200 years ago. Kutiyattam represents a synthesis of Sanskrit classicism and reflects the local traditions of Kerala. So what exactly is it? It is a combination of Sanskrit theatre with the elements of Kuthu. So what exactly is it? It is a Tamil performing art which is as old as the Sangram era. So what it says is, in its stylized and codified theatrical language, Netabhinaya. So there is constant movement of the eyes that happens within this particular act, and there is Hastabhinaya. So this is almost similar to Bharatanatyam. So there is eye movement and there is hand movement where these gestures coordinate together in order to give a particular feel with respect to a character. So what they focus on the thoughts and feelings of the main character. Actors undergo 10 to 15 years of rigorous training to become fully fledged performance with sophisticated breathing control and subtle muscle shifts on the face of the body. The actors lies in collaborating situation episode in all all details. Therefore, a single act may take days to perform and complete performance may last up to 40 days. It further says Kutiyattam is traditionally performed in theatres called as Kuttapalams, which are located in Hindu temples. So it is officially recognized as the UNESCO as the masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. So kindly remember these facts. This can also be a potential question when it comes to your prelims examination. So moving on, the next important point from the prelims is Indian Council of World Affairs. This is on your page 10. So what is it? It is a New Delhi based Indian think tank established in 1943. It was registered as a non-official, non-political, non-profit organization under the Registration of Societies Act of 1863. So it is a non-profit organization. That's the most important point we need to understand. It is devoted exclusively for the study of international relations and foreign affairs. It has been declared as an institution of national importance in 2001 by an act of parliament, and then the Vice President of India is the ex officio president of the ICWA. Kindly remember this. And the Minister of External Affairs is its vice president, and it has conducted international conferences like Asian Relations Conference in 1947 under the leadership of freedom fighter Sarojini Naidu, and also United Nations and the New World Order in 1994. So kindly remember these facts. This can pop up in your prelims as well. So moving on, let's look into the awareness. It says India rejects UK proposal on DNA test for illegal migrants, blue stickers for petrol, CNG, orange for diesel, off OISI raw and covert operation on page 11. Coral reefs could survive global warming, says study on page 18. Like it or not, Google tracks your movements on page 18. So have a fair bit of an idea on all these articles. This can become a fodder for your mains answer writing. So this is it for today. Please look into the BYJU'S CNA, both pre as well as mains. Look into the practice questions. Put all your answers on the comment section. We will evaluate and give you the relevant feedback for the same. So this is it for today. Thank you so much. All the best.